Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission operation from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. For those of you who may be joining us again from our earlier coverage of the launch out at Vandenberg Space Force Base, welcome back. If this is your first Falcon 9 related live stream with us today, welcome in. You're watching live coverage of we'll emphasize this throughout the coverage, a static fire test of the Falcon 9 rocket. Just a static fire test is on tap today. This is an important milestone, though, as SpaceX is preparing for the crewed launch of the AX-4 mission, which is currently targeting flight from this pad at 8:22 a.m. on Tuesday, June 10th. 12:22 UTC for all of those joining around the world. As you can see, looking at Launch Complex 39A, the Crew Access Arm has retracted away from the Crew Dragon spacecraft at the top of the Falcon 9 stack. Currently, SpaceX is fueling its Falcon 9 rocket in order to perform a static fire test, which will be just a brief ignition of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster. On board today is Falcon 9 booster tail number B1094, which, when it launches on Tuesday, will be making its second trip to space and back. This booster last flew on April 29th, supporting the launch of the Starlink 12-10 mission. Also lifted off from this pad, but landed on the drone ship called a Shortfall of Gravitas. When launch day comes around and this booster does take flight, following stage separation, it'll perform a flip maneuver and target a touchdown not on a drone ship, but back at landing zone number 1. A good touchdown at LZ1 would be the 52nd to date. SpaceX is getting close to winding down its time using its current landing zones 1 and 2, as the U.S. Space Force is working to bring aboard new launch providers and increase the number of companies that are able to operate at the spaceport here in Florida. Those pads will be turned over to commercial companies for development for launching their rockets. And in turn, SpaceX will construct launch pads that will become operational in the near-ish future at both Launch Complex 39A, as well as looking at a couple of options over at Slick 40. There are 2 designs that they're actually looking at right now, Option A and Option B, out at Slick 40, and right now the draft environmental assessment is out for that. So you can go ahead and take a look at the plans, what they look like, and offer public comment through early July. Currently T-minus 25 minutes, roughly 28 seconds and counting to this planned static fire test. For those of you who may not be on X, the 45th Weather Squadron did publish their launch weather forecast for the AX-4 mission, or Axiom Mission 4. Prime launch day has actually pretty good liftoff weather, 90% favorable, with just cumulus clouds as the possible constraint to launch. However, there is a high risk currently to the ascent corridor recovery area for every crewed mission with either a Dragon spacecraft or Starliner spacecraft launching off of Pad 41. But in this case, for the Dragon spacecraft, crews need to make sure that there is good weather not only for the immediate area of the pad and along the initial ascent of the rocket, but also for the recovery crews that will be stationed along the ascent corridor up from the pad here in Florida, with the final recovery zone up near Shannon, Ireland. So again, with the ascent recovery weather listed as a high risk, I would not be surprised to see this launch slip at least a day. A 24-hour delay per the current weather forecast would drop the liftoff weather down from 90% favorable to 80% favorable, with concerns both for the cumulus cloud rule as well as flight through precipitation. The ascent corridor recovery weather would improve from being a high risk to a moderate to high risk. And then a 48-hour turnaround, so talking about moving the launch from a Tuesday opportunity to a Thursday opportunity, would place the ascent corridor recovery weather at a moderate risk and further decrease the liftoff weather from 80% favorable to 75% favorable. Same risk criteria, though, or primary concerns, that is, for cumulus clouds as well as flying through precipitation. So meteorologists are going to be hard at work gathering as much data as possible to give the best assessment to not only SpaceX, but to, of course, Axiom Space, which is the customer for this mission, and also keeping the folks at NASA in the loop, since the International Space Station will be receiving this new Crew Dragon spacecraft. I want to thank the more than 400 of you who are with us live as we're getting things going on this Sunday afternoon here in Florida. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, share the stream, allows more folks to find their way to this live static fire test coverage. Also want to thank Rick Donner for being back with us, for helping out in the live chat. You can help out our mods by following the rules of the chat, by refraining from delving into overt politics and religion, by not typing in all caps or spamming with overly excessive emojis. And we also ask that you converse in English so that our moderators can respond as appropriate. And last but certainly not least, that you treat others with the same respect that you want to be treated. I also want to thank our channel member community here on YouTube for making these live stream opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Butterfly, the Rocket Girl, Mel Roberts Harold. Good to see you again. Rally JSRL, Joni Mahoney, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch and static fire test opportunities here in the Cape in 4K. We're coming up on the start of the big vent here, which should be beginning in now less than 10 seconds. That'll give us a good visual indication of where we are on the count, confirming that things are moving along on time. Not seeing the vent yet, so there may be some adjustment to our countdown clock. And there you see the big vent now underway, and just a quick adjustment to our countdown clock to reflect that. This vent is part of SpaceX's process for thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. This venting will continue on until just about T minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. And then second stage lock load begins at the 16-minute mark. Now T minus 17 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. Got just about a minute left on the big vent here. As we come up to the conclusion of the big vent here in less than 15 seconds, and second stage lock load will begin at the 16-minute mark. And the big vent has now wrapped up. Moving on to launch load. Just about 14 minutes ago, ahead of the planned static fire test for this Falcon 9 rocket. Again, this is in preparation for the upcoming launch of the Axiom Mission 4 flight to the International Space Station. The crew will spend roughly 2 weeks on board the ISS, conducting more than 60 experiments from countries and research institutes spanning more than 30 countries. Notable, this mission for a number of reasons. Talking about the hardware for a second, taking a look at the Crew Dragon spacecraft before it was integrated onto the Falcon 9 rocket that you see there in the live picture on the right-hand side of your screen. This is a brand new Dragon, which has yet to be publicly named. It's got the tail number C213, entering service now as the fifth and planned final Dragon to be brought into the fold by SpaceX. Once upon a time, this Dragon was set to launch in support of the Crew 9 mission to the International Space Station. Plans changed when readiness of this Dragon moved the timelines around a little bit. It was then shifted to be the Dragon in support of Crew 10. And then earlier this year, the decision was made because of this Dragon's lack of readiness to support Crew 10 when NASA and the international partners wanted to get that up. And so they made the call to pull forward the Dragon that was set to fly the AX-4 mission, Dragon Resilience, which is now docked to the space station, and instead allow this new Dragon to fly the AX-4 mission. Once this Dragon undocks from the space station, it will conduct a splashdown off the coast of California and will be just the second crew flight to splash down off the west coast following the flight of Fram 2 earlier this year. And here's a look at your AX-4 crew. This four-member astronaut cadre selected from countries around the world, led by the woman in the middle of the screen, Peggy Whitson, a storied astronaut who is one of the most recent inductees into the Astronaut Hall of Fame here in the United States. That ceremony happening just about a week and a half ago. Peggy Whitson, also the recipient of the Michael Collins Trophy for a Lifetime Achievement, member of the Forbes 50 over 50, and was named as part of Time's 100 Most Influential People in the World back in 2018. She holds the record for the most time in space by a U.S. astronaut, currently at 675 days, looking to add about 14 more to that total. Obviously, weather depending, could potentially extend Whitson's mission and add another day or two onto that. Whitson was also the first female commander of the International Space Station and so far the only woman to have served twice as the ISS commander. She'll also be just the third person to fly aboard a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft for a second time, joining alongside her Axiom Space colleague, former NASA astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria, who was the commander of the AX-1 and AX-3 missions, as well as Jared Isaacman, the commander of the Inspiration 4 and Polaris Dawn missions. To Whitson's left in the picture from our perspective is the mission pilot, Shubhanshu Shukla, has the call sign of Shuks. He is one of 4 astronauts selected by the Indian Space Research Organization as part of the Gaganyaan mission, the country's first human spaceflight undertaking. This will be his first trip to space, as is the case with the 2 mission specialists that are also flying on board. The tall gentleman in the middle bearing the flag of Poland Gonna try to not botch this again. This is Sławosz, Uznański-Wiśniewski. Promise I'll get this better by the time we get to launch coverage day. He's a member of the European Space Agency's Astronaut Reserve class of 2022. You may remember another fellow member of that reserve class flew aboard the last Axiom mission. That was Marcus Want. Like Shooks, he will also be flying to space for the first time. And one of the notable things about this mission is that each of these three countries, India, Poland, and Hungary, the last time one of their countries' nationals flew into space was at least 40 years ago. So that is part of the highlight of the mission is bringing these countries back into space as they all undertake their various human spaceflight programs. Just under 8 minutes to go on this Falcon 9 static fire. The final member of the AX4 crew on the right-hand side of your photo here, that is Tibor Kapu, who is a mechanical engineer. And I'm just now noticing that he is just about 4 months younger than me and already going to space. So he's doing quite well for himself in his career. I'm only just a little bit jealous. He was selected as one of 4 Hungarians to be part of the Hungarian to Orbit, or HUNOR, astronaut program. The team has been training for several months now at this point across the really the globe in order to get ready for this mission, going to Japan. Obviously, this photo coming from Houston, Texas at the Johnson Space Center in the mock-up of the International Space Station. They've also been to the astronaut training facility in Europe and have done quite a bit of training in various spots in order to get ready for this mission coming up again, targeting Tuesday, but weather being what it is, don't be surprised if that mission date slips. Last little visual wanted to show you here. You got the two mission patches for this upcoming flight. The one on the left was designed by the crew themselves. That is the Axiom Mission patch. And of course, the one on the right with the prominent four-leaf clover, present in all SpaceX patches. That is the one designed by launch provider SpaceX. And the different bands of color that are emanating from the dragon in the center, likely representative of the various colors of the flags represented by the crew on board. Just a little more than 5 minutes to go ahead of this upcoming static fire test here at Historic Launch Complex 39A. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, I see we've got a little more than 1,100 of you now live today. This is a static fire test of the Falcon 9 rocket, so barring something catastrophic, the Falcon 9 will not be going anywhere. This will just be a brief ignition of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster to get some data on this rocket, which has only flown once before. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, share this stream, allow some folks to find their way into this live test coverage. At this point in the count, the clamp arms just beneath the Dragon's trunk should be opening up shortly, and the transporter erector, the strong back, will be reclining just a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Again, being that this is not a launch opportunity, the transporter erector won't be making its full recline. Now 4 minutes out. Coming up in less than a minute, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Will be full. Now just under 3 minutes, that first stage LOX tank should be full. Same will be true on the second stage, right about the 2 minute mark. T-minus 2 minutes and counting. At this point, the Falcon 9 rocket should be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. We're seeing here are the ground gas closeouts. Typical as SpaceX clears the remaining liquid oxygen in the feed lines ahead of the ignition of the booster engines. We're coming up on 1 minute to ignition. As we're approaching the final minute of the count, so far it has been we're approaching the point in which the SpaceX launch director should be giving the go-ahead for ignition of today's test. "30 seconds. "15 seconds. And here we go in about 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And appears to be engine shutdown. Listening in for the rumble of those Merlins as it reaches us here at the press site. And it appears as though we've gotten a good static fire test of the Falcon 9 rocket. At this point, SpaceX will conduct a review of the data from this test and determine if they did indeed have a good clean static fire. This will be incorporated into the launch readiness review, which is scheduled for tomorrow. Following that review, there will be a post-LRR teleconference, which we'll be hearing from Axiom Space as well as SpaceX and NASA. The head of the ISS program office, Dana Weigel. That'll be our final chance to hear from leadership ahead of the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Again, currently targeting that liftoff on June 10th at 8:22 a.m. Eastern, 12:22 UTC. We'll be very closely watching for updates on the weather to see if the ascent corridor recovery weather improves. If not, look for likely a launch delay to Wednesday or potentially Thursday. Of course, we'll keep you posted on our website, spaceflightnow.com, and our social channels for any updates to the timing of this mission. Before we go, though, do want to draw your attention to just one more element of activity that was happening today. Before this static fire campaign got underway, SpaceX conducted a dry dress rehearsal with the 4 members of the AX crew and all of the launch team in the loop. Looking at a few photos that were published by SpaceX as they were getting ready for the static fire test. Looking at Commander Peggy Whitson on the right, Shukla on the left, the pilot of the mission, representing India. And then you have the 2 mission specialists walking down the crew access arm with Tibor throwing up, looks like a shaka there. Nice view of the Florida coast and the Kennedy Space Center just off of his shoulder there in that view. One last image of the crew together on the tower, suited up, ready to go. Again, we will have extensive multi-hour live coverage of the AX4 mission coming up for you on launch day. Currently planning for that on Tuesday, of course, but we'll be ready and waiting whenever the weather is ready to cooperate with this mission coverage. Want to thank all of you in the live chat who have been with us today. Especially a big shout out to Rick Donner, our moderator for this live stream. I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's not only been running the technical operations of the broadcast, but quite literally running around quite effectively behind the scenes to make sure that everything was working for this live launch coverage, or live static fire test coverage today. So appreciate all the hard work for Stephen off mic currently. Most importantly, though, want to thank you for wherever you've been watching from. The AX4 mission is our next flight that is on the docket, so we look forward to welcoming you back on Tuesday, assuming the weather cooperates. Otherwise, there's also a Falcon 9 launch that is poised to take off on Tuesday as well. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson-Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.